speaking to La Presse, you heard about this on the weekend, Justin Trudeau talks about the Senate. And I was laughing about this yesterday. He has now pushed me into the abolition side. I was always somebody who wanted a reformed Senate. I was aghast last week when Premier Brad Wall came out and said he wants it abolished. I think you can reform this thing. Elect senators. Don't even monkey around with the regional number of senators. Just elect them and get a fixed date. Give them 6, 8, 10, 9 years, and then you're done. But then Justin Trudeau on the weekend says, quote, "We have 24 senators in Quebec. There are only 6 from Alberta and 6 from British Columbia. That benefits us. It's an advantage for Quebec, and it would be unacceptable to want the Senate abolished." So he wants it reformed because we in Quebec see an advantage. Now, he defends the we reference and our advantage as, quote, "I am a Quebecer, and from time to time when I'm speaking with Quebecers, I might use the word we." Then he says he doesn't apologize, doesn't regret what he said. He said it's a fact. Quebec has more senators than BC, than Alberta. It's in the Constitution. It's not a statement of opinion. It's a fact. Now, in the House of Commons and the Senate yesterday, Trudeau got nailed. Marge LeBreton, the government leader of the Senate, called the comment, quote, "unbelievably dumb." In the House of Commons, Heritage Minister James Moore said these kind of comments divide Canadians, they alienate the West. And stepping up in an increasing role of leadership among the premiers, Brad Wall, who last week came out as wanting the Senate abolished, he addressed in a tweet yesterday on his Twitter account the Trudeau comment as well. Quote, "He opposes abolition because the Senate status quo gives advantage to Quebec over the West," wrote Premier Wall. Premier Brad Wall joining us now from his base in Swift Current. Premier, thanks for taking our call.
Morning, John.
What did you mean yesterday on the Trudeau comment?
Well, it's just very disappointing. This is someone that wants to be Prime Minister, and apparently the filter through which he is analyzing a national issue right now that's garnering a lot of public attention is the balance or imbalance of that issue in favor of Quebec. I don't think that's, if I'm the Premier, if this is a comment from the Premier of Quebec or even a Quebec federal member of Parliament, maybe one that doesn't necessarily believe in the unity of the country, that might not be that surprising, but this is someone that wants to be the Prime Minister, and I think his explanation is found wanting as well, because, he's not simply just talking about, it's not just a matter of pride in his home province or his home community. All politicians are going to obviously reference that from time to time. This is a national issue, and apparently the analysis he's using, the lens through which he's sort of looking at this particular issue is what is to the advantage of Quebec versus, in this case, Western Canada. It is very divisive. It's the very last thing the country needs right now.
Premier Brad Wall with us. Okay, Senate costs about $92 million a year, which is a lot of money, but in the scheme of several $100 billion to run Canada, it's not a lot of money. I was frankly shocked when you came out in favor of abolition last week, because I always saw you as somebody who wanted to tweak, reform, change the Senate and still leave it in place.
Well, John, first of all, the party policy isn't abolition. I want to be very clear about that. There was a resolution at our last convention that was not passed to move our Saskatchewan party position towards abolition. I'm hearing from party members. I think we're going to revisit that particular issue. But for me personally, I have moved beyond reform, and here's why. Over my time as in this current job, I have just come to the real understanding that we're not going to get meaningful reform, and I don't think tweaking it is enough. Tweaking it means perhaps, as you've highlighted in the introduction, we elect some senators, and by the way, maybe Alberta and Saskatchewan would elect senators, maybe New Brunswick, and that's it. That's it. Ontario's not going that direction. Quebec is most assuredly not going that direction. So we'd have this hybrid Senate, some appointed, some elected. Even the elected members are elected once and never face the prospect of re-election. I think it's re-election that focuses the mind of politicians. It's Thanksgiving Day that gets the attention of all of us turkeys. You need that point of accountability. That's point number one. Point number two is, I think, the kind of reform the Senate needs is more than tweaking. It's a significant level of reform. The most important E of the so-called Triple E Senate, to me, is equal. We need the provinces to be equal in the Senate, so there's a counterbalance to the rep by pop institution that is the House of Commons.
So you've obviously had that transformation, aside from being the premier or being the leader of your party, just as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking policy, you've changed.
True. Yeah.
So does a lot of that come from the people you correspond with on a daily basis? I mean, maybe I've got the tin ear here. I always thought we were pretty well divided in this country. About the same number of people wanted to reform the Senate as wanted to scrap it. Are you getting a sense now that it's to be scrapped?
I think so, and this was even before the current scandal. People, I think people who are making decisions now based on what they're reading are maybe making it more out of emotion, but I think most people have come to this conclusion. You had an author on your show, I think, last week who who wrote a book in the 90s about that generation of scandals. We also have to ask the question, this basic question, it's 2013. Do we need people appointed by the Prime Minister who have a major decision-making legislative role in this country? I'm not sure that we do. And so if that's the first conclusion that we can come to, then we have to canvass the options. And one has been reform, but if the whole country's not going to do it, if it's just the West that's electing a few senators, in our case, in Alberta's case, and maybe in New Brunswick's case, we do have this hybrid. Plus, we do not have the accountability of re-election. Plus, we wouldn't have an equal Senate where provinces have an equal voice. It just the case starts to mount in favor of, let's save the $100 million. We have a House of Commons, a unicameral or one-house governments, legislatures work across the country in the provinces. They will work in Ottawa. And here's one final point. I think increasingly the provinces themselves have assumed the role of the Senate. They're the best voice for provincial representation, not senators appointed by any particular Prime Minister who, by the way, then must toe the party line of the Prime Minister that appointed them.
Premier Brad Wall, are you prepared to be the Premier who then pushes at the next Premier's Conference, or the Council of the Federation, as it's called, to actually reopen the Constitution just for the purpose of passing a resolution to abolish the Senate?
Well, not without my party support. I have my personal views, but in a national forum or when it comes down to policy for the government, I'm obviously not going to go against the wishes of the party. We are looking at this issue as a party, and so if, for example, by the time of the next Premier's meeting, the next Council of the Federation meeting, the party position has changed, we may well be the first province that says, look, let's all as Canadians, as Canadian provinces, let us introduce resolutions in our respective houses, in our legislatures in the fall, have a free vote, let members vote their wishes. This might be an option for us. Have them reflect the views of their constituents. Also remembering that, notwithstanding the amount of oxygen the Senate issue is taking up right now, it's by far and away not the most important issue facing the province. The issues here remain, keeping our economy strong and health care and highways. But this might be a matter we could deal with in the fall. It might be a good matter for a free vote, not just here, but in legislatures across the country. We could, resolve the matter once and for all.
If your party moves to where you are on abolition, how do you get the party to determine that before the fall?
Well, there are some mechanisms we have in our Constitution we can canvass. We can basically have a referendum of our members. That's an option. There's some things that we can do as a party to determine what policy is. We actually don't have any party policy on the Senate. We did defeat the resolution of abolition in the fall. The convention did, but that's the only resolution sort of on the books, and it's defeated. There's not a so-called positive motion or resolution. So there are things that we can do, and I'm not going to move ahead of the party. But if the party gives me a mandate to do that, Saskatchewan may well lead this debate in the country and see if we can build support amongst the other provinces.
Premier, always good. Thanks for checking in.
John, thanks for your time.
Brad Wall, Premier of Saskatchewan.